Hi, I'm Nathan Gopin, founder of Bible Globe International and director and producer of the Revelation movie and study series. If Bible prophecy is one of your interests, you're likely aware that there are several schools of thought as to how the book of Revelation should be interpreted. One main debate is the preterist versus futurist view, whether the events described in Revelation pertain mainly to the first century, culminating in the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD, or whether the Great Tribulation is yet future, perhaps something that will occur in our day and age. Since this topic comes up enough for me personally in online discussions, I thought I would outline my viewpoints and reasoning here and hope that may help many of you in navigating these waters. In April of 70 AD, Rome, under the leadership of Titus, laid siege to Jerusalem. Within a few months, the city had been completely ravaged by the Romans. The temple was burned to the ground, a huge number of inhabitants of Jerusalem perished, and the Jews who remained alive were scattered to the nations. While I do not support the preterist position, I can certainly understand it because clearly some of what Jesus spoke of in Matthew 24, Mark 13, and Luke 21 relate to the events leading up to and culminating in the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD. Let's look at the wording in these passages. They all begin with an almost identical account as recorded in the first 3 verses of Matthew 24. Jesus went out from the temple and was going on his way. His disciples came to him to show him the buildings of the temple. But he answered them, "You see all these things, don't you? Most certainly I tell you, there will not be left here one stone on another that will not be thrown down." As he sat on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately, saying, "Tell us, when will these things be? What is the sign of your coming and of the end of the age?" Jesus goes on to tell them about wars, natural disasters and signs from the heavens, persecution, martyrdom, then goes on to describe the siege and destruction of Jerusalem, and the Jews being led captive into all nations, and then imagery normally associated with end times and Great Tribulation events, including the sun and moon darkened, stars falling from the sky, then the second coming, and gathering his chosen together from the 4 winds. I take the position, as do many others, that this is an example of prophetic telescoping, which occurs throughout the Bible, where there are both short-term and long-term prophecies spoken of within the same passage. Some of the messianic prophecies in the Old Testament spoke of both the first and second coming as though they were one and the same. This, of course, led to confusion for the Jews that believed Jesus to be the Messiah, thinking he would deliver them from Rome now and set up his kingdom. They did not comprehend that there was a difference in timing and purpose between a suffering servant, Lamb of God Messiah, who would deliver the people from sin first, and the Lion of Judah, son of David, ruling, reigning Messiah, who would come at a different time in the future. But Luke 21 especially makes it clear that near-term and future fulfillment are both being discussed. After all, the conversation started when he told his disciples that the day is coming when not one stone will be left on another. But as recorded in Matthew 24:3, they asked him 2 distinct questions. 1, when will these things be? And 2, what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age? Now clearly at that time they were not expecting those 2 distinct events to be separated by much span of time, let alone 2,000 years or more. Nevertheless, Yeshua responded in turn. 1. Luke 21:20-24, Jerusalem will be destroyed, they will fall by the edge of the sword and led captive among the nations, and Jerusalem will be trampled underfoot by the Gentiles until the times of the Gentiles are fulfilled. And then 2. Luke 21:25-28, the end time stuff in the second coming. There is no indication how long the times of the Gentiles is, and again clearly nobody in the first century expected it to be this long. But Mark 13:7-10, for example, seems to indicate a gradual progression of wars and rumors of wars, nations rising against nations, the gospel being preached to the whole world, and so forth before the final showdown, the Great Tribulation and the second coming. So I would ask, in the first century, was there a gradual progression of nation rising against nation and kingdom against kingdom? Was the gospel preached to the whole world? So far as I see it, Rome was pretty much in charge the whole time, and the gospel reached the Middle East and parts of Turkey, Greece, and Rome. I don't believe any of the disciples reached what is now modern-day North or South America, England, Russia, Australia, and so forth. Next comes the date of authorship. It's clear from chapter 1 of Revelation that John was in exile on the island of Patmos when he wrote the book. There are 2 major schools of thought as to when that took place, the early and the late dates. The early date, which is what the preterists rely on to support their viewpoints, places the writing of the book around 65 AD during the reign of the Emperor Nero. Nero was the first Roman emperor that launched a major persecution campaign against early Christians. When Rome suffered great loss during a fire in 64 AD, rumors spread that Nero himself had set the fire. In order to deflect the accusations, Nero placed the blame on the Christians and began rounding them up and putting them to death in all kinds of barbarous ways. It was during the persecutions by Nero that the Apostle Paul was beheaded and Peter was crucified. Those that believe Revelation was written during this time claim that Nero sent John into exile on the island of Patmos, but critics of that view argue that it would have been uncharacteristic of Nero to kill 2 apostles, yet send a third into exile. The late date, which is more widely accepted, places the writing around 95 AD, during the reign of Domitian. Domitian was known for sending people into exile, and incidentally the majority of early church writers affirmed that John was sent into exile during the reign of Domitian and returned to Ephesus in 96 AD after Domitian was assassinated. Also, there are numerous clues in the text of the book itself that reinforce the later date. For example, back in 65 AD, Ephesus was still a thriving, strong church that Paul and Timothy were actively discipling. Yet the letter to the church in Ephesus in Revelation chapter 2 speaks of the church losing its first love, and some erroneous doctrine coming into it. It's far more likely that enough time had passed, a generation perhaps, in order to decline from what it once was to that condition. Revelation also addresses a letter to the church in Smyrna, which did not even exist in 65 AD. And the message to the church in Laodicea, which is described in Revelation as prospering and feeling a false sense of self-sufficiency and not needing anything, would be much more appropriate in 95 AD, after the city had just completed a 30-year rebuilding project after being hit by a devastating earthquake in 61 AD. Combining the evidence that supports the late date of authorship with the seeming long indeterminate period of time known as the Times of the Gentiles, I'm led to conclude that yes, the futurist view seems to fit the data the best, and the Times of the Gentiles turns out to have lasted a really long time. But don't some passages in the New Testament even hint at things taking much longer than expected? The parable of the 10 virgins in Matthew 25, the note in 2 Peter 3 that scoffers will ridicule the prophecies of the second coming because it's been so long since the fathers fell asleep and everything has continued as it has, but that with the Lord 1,000 years is as a day. That means it's only been 2 days so far, so be patient, watch always, and pray. If you found value in this video, please prayerfully share it with friends who you think may also benefit from it. And if you would like to find out more about our Revelation movie and study project, please visit revelationmovie.org. Thank you.